Sign it, or I'll make sure you die in this hospital." On the hospital bed in the late stages of liver cancer, my husband threw the divorce papers in my face, with his glamorous white moonlight standing beside him, 25 years of marriage, and all I got was his words, "If I had known you, a country girl, would only hold me back, I would never have given up on my childhood sweetheart from the city, my stepdaughter, whom I raised," sneered, "Stop pretending, you wicked stepmother." In my moment of despair, I grabbed a scalpel and decided to end it all with him. As I opened my eyes, my reincarnated husband yanked his hand away. "Let's break up, you're not worthy of me." A key technical expert in the factory, I wasn't angry, just smirked with sarcasm. "Without my father's factory, how would a middle school graduate like you become an engineer?" The intense pain in my wrist pulled me back to reality from the darkness. Li Ming yanked my hand away with such force that I stumbled. "Break up, Lin Xiaoyu. As a key technical expert in the factory, you, with your unsophisticated background, will never be worthy." I lost my balance and fell straight to the ground. The dull pain from my knees hitting the concrete floor paled in comparison to the sharp pain in my heart. Li Ming didn't even glance at me. He turned around and strode out of the workshop, his lips curling into a disdainful smirk. "Xiaoyan." His voice suddenly softened, and he opened his arms, rushing towards the woman standing at the factory gate. The woman, who Xiaoyan, smiled triumphantly, her smooth face glowing, as she threw herself into Li Ming's arms. "Mingo, I knew you wouldn't let me down. How could a country girl like her ever be worthy of someone as talented as you?" Li Ming wrapped his arms around her slender waist and, in full view of everyone, kissed her lips. I knelt on the ground, blood seeping from my torn pants, mixing with my tears as they dripped onto the floor. My heart aching so much I could barely breathe. "Xiaoyu." Dad rushed out of the office. Seeing this scene, his face turned ashen. "Li Ming, what do you mean by this?" Li Ming snorted coldly, wrapping his arm around Hu Xiaoyan's shoulder. "Director Lin, to be honest, if I had known your daughter, this country girl, would only hold me back, I would never have given up on my childhood sweetheart from the city, you." Dad was so furious that his whole body trembled, and his finger pointing at Li Ming was shaking. "Don't be angry, father-in-law." "Oh, I mean, former father-in-law." Li Ming grinned. "Thanks to you promoting me to a key technical position, I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. But as for being your son-in-law, I'm done with that." I realized I had been reborn. I tried to push myself up with my hands, but my legs felt weak, and my whole body was trembling uncontrollably. "Look at you, pitiful as ever." Li Ming turned his head, disdainfully glancing at me. "You're just a country bumpkin, never seen the world." The factory workers gathered around, pointing and whispering among themselves. "I heard she's been dating Li Ming for nearly 2 years. This is it. She's completely out of her league, like a toad lusting after a swan." Sigh, who can blame her for being the factory director's daughter? Otherwise, would Li Ming even look at her? Without Director Lin, no one would even spare her a glance. Every word felt like a knife stabbing into my heart. My face burned with shame, and I wished I could disappear into a crack in the ground. My father quickly helped me up. His arm was trembling, and his voice was low and furious. "Li Ming, you have 3 days to clear out your dorm and don't bother coming to work anymore." Hu Xiaoyan immediately stepped forward. "Director Lin, you can't do this. Minga is a key technical expert in the factory. You can't just, because of personal matters." "Shut up," my father roared. "You have no say in this." Li Ming, however, calmly patted Hu Xiaoyan's shoulder and reassured her. "Don't be afraid, Xiaoyan, he wouldn't dare fire me. Without me, those technical issues in the factory would be unsolvable. If he fires me, the whole factory would come to a standstill." With that, he walked away triumphantly, arm in arm with Hu Xiaoyan, leaving me and my father standing there, surrounded by the workers' whispers and pointing fingers. Dad helped me back to the office, and I was trembling all over, not from the pain in my knee, but from the sudden memories that almost suffocated me. "Xiaoyu, don't be afraid, Dad is here." Dad handed me a glass of water, worriedly watching my pale face. The glass shook violently in my hand, and droplets splashed onto my hand, icy cold. 25 years of marriage flashed before my eyes like a slideshow. I had a child for Li Ming, but died in childbirth. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital stunned my eyes, and the nurse took away my child, forever. Li Ming's eyes showed no sorrow, only regret and a hint of relief that I couldn't understand at the time. 3 months later, he brought back a baby, claiming it was a distant relative's child whose parents had passed away, and asked me to help raise it. That child was Li Yu. With tears in my eyes, I raised her, giving her all the maternal love I had. I took care of Li Ming's mother day and night. attending to her every need, even holding my hand and calling me a good daughter-in-law as she took her last breath. I invested all the dividends from my father's factory into Li Ming's career, funding his education and training, all for the sake of his success, and yet, he had been carrying on with Hu Xiaoyan behind my back for over 20 years. That day, on the bed in the late stages of liver cancer, with an 4 needle in my thin hand, Li Ming entered with Hu Xiaoyan and Li Yu, sign it. Or I'll leave you to die in this hospital. He slammed the divorce papers into my face, the cold sheets cutting my cracked lips. Mom, no, Auntie, stop pretending, you wicked stepmother, Li Yu sneered as she yanked out my oxygen tube, struggling to breathe. All I could hear was Hu Xiaoyan's voice, Xiaoyu, don't blame Yaya, after all, she's my real daughter, not related to you by blood. In that moment, I was consumed by utter despair. I grabbed the scalpel from the bedside table and plunged it with all my strength into his chest. Xiaoyu, Xiaoyu, Dad's voice pulled me back to reality from a terrifying memory. What's wrong? My tears had soaked my collar, and my nails had dug deep into my palm, leaving 4 bloody marks. Dad, I'm fine. I wiped away my tears and took a deep breath. Don't worry, I won't have anything to do with Li Ming anymore. Dad sighed in relief. That's good. I was worried you might forgive that jerk. Just then, the office door swung open, and Li Ming walked in, his face wearing a fawning smile. Father-in-law. I was just momentarily confused. Get out, Dad roared. Ignoring Dad, Li Ming walked straight up to me, his tone suddenly contemptuous. Lin Xiaoyu. Don't think you're off the hook just because you're hiding behind your dad. You know what? I remember everything about the future. I know you'll hold me back, cost me so many opportunities. This time, I absolutely won't let you, this jinx, ruin my future. I looked up and met his gaze, the fear in my heart turning into cold determination. Li Ming, from now on, you and I are done. Humph, acting so high and mighty. Without me, you'd be stuck as a factory worker, living under your father's shadow for the rest of your life, a girl from the countryside with no education. Who else would want you except me? Li Ming, you're fired. Come to the office tomorrow to handle the termination procedures. My father's voice was ice cold, devoid of any warmth. Li Ming's eyes flickered with panic, but he quickly regained his composure. Director Lin, don't be rash. No one else in the factory knows how to operate that new imported machine except me. Dad shook the phone in his hand. I just called the technical school in the city. A new technician will be starting tomorrow. There are plenty of people 10 times better than you. Don't get too big for your britches. You. Li Ming's face turned pale with anger as he pointed at me and shouted. Lin Xiaoyu, are you happy now? You've cost me my job. 3 days later, as I returned from the factory canteen after lunch, I saw Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan standing at my doorstep. Xiaoyu. Long time no see, Hu Xiaoyan said with a fake smile on her lips. I ignored her and walked straight to my door, but Hu Xiaoyan grabbed me by the arm. Don't be so cold, we came all this way just to see you. Her nails dug deep into my arm. Ming told me everything. You two are both reincarnated. What a coincidence. I looked up sharply, unable to believe my ears. What did you say? Li Ming wrapped his arm around Hu Xiaoyan's waist and smiled smugly. That's right. Xiaoyan and I both remember our past lives. We're destined to be together. Xiaoyu, you're so pitiful, Hu Xiaoyan said with fake sympathy. In your previous life, you worked so hard to take care of Minga for 25 years, yet you never won his heart. Yuri just a hindrance. You can't even have a child properly. My daughter is much better than yours. Do you know, Li Yu is actually my child. You've been raising a stranger for over 20 years. She looked at me with disdain. In this life, we've decided not to play games anymore. Li Ming pulled out an invitation from his pocket and handed it to me. This is our wedding invitation with Xiaoyan. It's next month, right on the day I get promoted at the city machinery factory. How about that? Jealous. I got into the city machinery factory on my own merits, not because of my father-in-law. You'll be stuck as a pathetic loser in your dad's factory for the rest of your life. I opened the invitation, which clearly read wedding invitation for Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan along with a striking line, special promotion announcement for the groom, head of the technical group at the city machinery factory. In an instant, memories from my past life flooded back. That spring, Li Ming was repeatedly rejected when trying to get into the city machinery factory. It was only because I begged my dad to call the old director of the factory that Li Ming was able to secure a position. 3 months later, I convinced my dad to use our family savings to donate an imported machine to the city machinery factory. In exchange, Li Ming was promoted to technical team leader. All of this, however, Li Ming never knew. He simply thought his abilities had been recognized. What? Jealous? Hu Xiaoyan looked at me, even more smug when I remained silent. There's nothing you can do about it, after all. Ming and I are a perfect match made in heaven. You're destined to be a supporting character in this story. You're only fit to work as a little factory girl in your dad's plant, or marry an ordinary worker and live a mundane life, Li Ming said disdainfully. You're not worthy of someone like us. Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan's wedding took place as scheduled, with 30 tables set up at the city's largest hotel. I put on a brand new red dress, did my makeup meticulously, and strode into the wedding venue in high heels. The room fell silent instantly, all eyes focused on me. And whispers filled the air. My God, why is Lin Xiaoyu here? Has she no shame at all? Isn't this just asking for torture? Coming to Li Ming's wedding after he dumped you, you're really shameless. I hear Li Ming is now the technical team leader at the city's machinery factory. He's got a bright future ahead. Lin Xiaoyu will never be able to match up to him in this lifetime. Lin Xiaoyu, what are you doing here? Looking for trouble? Trying to ruin my wedding? Hu Xiaoyan frowned. Her voice sharp. You shameless woman. I shrugged. What could I possibly find fault with? Li Ming is now the technical team leader at the city's machinery factory, with a bright future ahead. Who would dare to offend him? Li Ming's eyes gleamed with pride at the mention. Naturally, it's not bragging. There's no one else in the city who can operate that imported equipment except me. I'm the backbone of the technical team. The factory director holds me in high regard. Just after my promotion, he gave me a bonus of 20,000 yuan. He deliberately raised his voice. This wedding is funded by that bonus money. A murmur of astonishment rose from the crowd. 20,000 yuan was a huge sum back in the late 1980s. Oh really? I said with a meaningful smile. So your promotion was truly due to your outstanding abilities. Li Ming's expression changed. But he quickly regained his composure. Of course it's real talent, unlike some people who only rely on their fathers. Without their own abilities, they can only hide behind their dads and be useless. Just then, a commotion broke out at the entrance of the venue. My dad walked in wearing a formal suit, holding a file bag. Director Lin is here. Someone whispered in surprise. Li Ming hurried over. Mr. Lin, it's such an honor that you could come. My father ignored him and walked straight to me. Xiaoyu, I brought everything. I took the file bag, opened it in front of everyone. And inside was a stack of documents stamped with the official seal of the municipal machinery factory. Li Ming, congratulations, I said with a smile, but I'm curious, do you really know how you got into the municipal machinery factory? Li Ming's smile froze on his face, his eyes flickering. Of course, it's because of my skills. I pulled out the first document from the file folder, which clearly stated, Comrade Lin Jiqiang recommends Comrade Li Ming for a position at the city machinery factory. This is, Li Ming's voice trembled slightly. This is the recommendation letter my father wrote to the old director of the city machinery factory. I said softly, without this letter, you wouldn't even have had the chance for an interview. Hu Xiaoyan quickly interjected, so what? Minga was promoted to technical team leader entirely because of his real skills. I pulled out the second document, which was an appointment letter. In recognition of Comrade Lin Jiqiang's special contributions to our factory, Li Ming, the recommender, is hereby appointed as the deputy team leader of the technical group. Deputy team leader. Li Ming was struck like lightning. But I was clearly team leader. My father let out a cold laugh, full of sarcasm. You can't even read the operation manual of that machine, and you call yourself a team leader. You didn't even graduate from middle school. It was only with our family's tutoring that you managed to get into a technical school. What real skills do you have? That's because, Li Ming stammered, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, because I had the manual translated into Chinese for you. His father interrupted. Otherwise you wouldn't even know how to turn it on. The room fell silent, everyone stunned by the scene. Li Ming's colleagues exchanged glances, and someone whispered, no wonder he's always so secretive. It's because of his connections. No, that's not it. Li Ming was sweating profusely. I do have real skills. Dad pulled a telegram from his pocket. This just came from the city machinery factory, saying they're revoking your position because you don't have the ability to operate that equipment. What? Li Ming grabbed the telegram, his face turning as pale as paper after reading it. It can't be. What do you clearly know? I sneered. You're just an ordinary worker who graduated from middle school. You don't even understand the basic technical principles, yet you dare to call yourself a technical backbone. Li Ming's legs gave way, and he slumped to the ground, his eyes filled with disbelief. No, it can't be. I clearly remember being the technical team leader, his father coldly said. You're just an ordinary worker I promoted. You're not even qualified to be a technician. that imported equipment was my daughter's dowry, meant for you and your wife, but now, his father glanced at Hu Xiaoyan. It seems I gave it to the wrong person. Hu Xiaoyan turned pale and quickly grabbed Li Ming's hand. Minga, don't listen to them, you're clearly very capable. I walked up to Li Ming, crouched down, and whispered, Li Ming. How could you have become an engineer without my father's factory? You're just a middle school graduate. You think you can change your fate just because you've been reborn, but you forgot. Without my father and my help, you're nothing. Li Ming's eyes gradually lost focus as he mumbled to himself. It can't be. I clearly remember. I was a key technical member. I had skills. You're mistaken, I sneered. Or rather, you only remember what you want to remember, in your past life. You only became an engineer because of my silent sacrifices behind the scenes, yet you betrayed me for 25 years with Hu Xiaoyan. In this life, without my help, you'll forever remain just an ordinary worker, not even a technician. Li Ming was struck as if by lightning, collapsing to the ground, his eyes losing all their luster instantly. Hu Xiaoyan watched this scene, her face turning extremely pale. You lied to me. You said you were a technical team leader with a bright future. I didn't lie to you, Li Ming weakly defended. I really remember. Enough, Hu Xiaoyan screamed. I won't marry a loser who can't even keep a job. She yanked the red flower off her head and threw it fiercely at Li Ming's face. The wedding is off. I want to call off the engagement. Li Ming looked at Hu Xiaoyan in despair. Xiaoyan, didn't you say we were destined to be together? Destined to be together, Hu Xiaoyan sneered. I thought you'd amount to something. Now it seems you're even worse off than an ordinary worker. I'm a city girl. Hu Xiaoyan, how could I possibly marry a good-for-nothing country bumpkin like you? Li Ming was struck like lightning, collapsing to the ground, his eyes instantly losing their luster. I stood up, looking down at them. What a pity, your so-called perfect match has come to an end. Li Ming, didn't you say I was only fit to be a factory worker? I said with a smile. So, guess who's the one stuck as an ordinary worker now? Li Ming looked up, his eyes filled with despair and resentment. Lin Xiaoyu, you knew all along. Of course I knew, I said calmly. I knew without my father's help, you're nothing. I knew without my sacrifice, you'd always just be an ordinary worker with a middle school diploma. I know you and Hu Xiaoyan betrayed me for 25 years, and I know Li Yu is your biological daughter. I know how the three of you forced me to sign the divorce papers while I was on my deathbed with terminal liver cancer. I know everything, so this time, I choose to let you experience the pain of being abandoned. Li Ming's face turned as pale as paper, his lips trembling, unable to speak. Hu Xiaoyan didn't care anymore. She grabbed her bag and ran out, shouting, I don't know any of you. This was all a lie from Li Ming. The wedding venue descended into chaos as guests began to leave, leaving Li Ming kneeling alone, looking like a discarded rag doll. Dad patted my shoulder. Xiaoyu, let's go. I nodded, turned, and left without another glance at Li Ming. Stepping out of the wedding venue, the bright sun and gentle breeze filled me with a sense of relief as I took a deep breath. 3 days after the wedding drama, Li Ming received the official dismissal notice from the city's machinery factory. He clutched the thin piece of paper, feeling as though the world was spinning around him. I'm really fired, Li Ming muttered to himself, his eyes vacant. Meanwhile, Hu Xiaoyan was packing her bags. Li Ming, you're such a loser, she sneered. I'm going to find a real man with actual abilities, not someone like you who relies on connections to deceive people. Li Ming knelt on the ground, pleading, Xiaoyan, don't go. Didn't we promise to start over together? Hu Xiaoyan chuckled disdainfully. Start over, with you, dream on. With that, she left without looking back, and so, I officially took over the technical department of my father's factory. With the experience from my past life and the knowledge I've gained over the years, I quickly demonstrated remarkable talent in the factory. Xiaoyu, you're amazing, my colleagues exclaimed. You can easily solve these complex technical problems. I smiled silently, secretly grateful that I had seized the opportunity of being reborn. Meanwhile, Li Ming began searching for jobs everywhere, only to be met with rejection at every turn. Sorry, we don't need someone without practical experience. Your resume looks suspicious. We can't hire you. No diploma. That's really unfortunate. In the end, Li Ming could only work as a temporary laborer at a construction site, earning a meager daily wage and eating the worst food. At that moment, Li Ming's mother came to my door, shouting at me, Lin Xiaoyu, you vicious woman, you've ruined my son's job. Do you even have a conscience? I looked at her coldly and said, Auntie, are you sure you want to talk about conscience with me? What do you mean? Li's mother was startled by my gaze. I took a deep breath and slowly said, do you remember how Li Ming treated you before he reincarnated? Li's mother was stunned. What reincarnation? What are you talking nonsense about? You had cirrhosis and were bedridden. Li Ming, on the other hand, left you in a nursing home all by yourself, not even coming back to visit during the new year. I said word by word. In the end, you passed away alone, with no one to send you off. Li's mother turned pale. No, it's impossible. Do you really think Li Ming loves you? I sneered. He's just waiting for you to die so he can inherit your house. Li's mother trembled all over, her eyes filled with disbelief. Xiaoyu, how do you know all this? Because in that future, it was me who took care of you, I said softly, until the moment you closed your eyes. It was my hand you held, not Li Ming's. Li's mother burst into tears and collapsed to the ground. My son, how could I have given birth to such an ungrateful wretch? I helped Li's mother to her feet and softly comforted her. Auntie, the past is gone, in this life. We all have a chance to start over. Li's mother clutched my hand tightly, choking back tears as she said, Xiaoyu, I'm sorry, I misjudged you. I smiled slightly. It's okay, Auntie, remember, Li Ming is not a good person. If you ever need help in the future, don't hesitate to come to me. Watching Mrs. Li's unsteady figure disappear into the distance, I felt a mix of emotions. Reborn, what changed was not just my own fate. Half a year later, our factory introduced a revolutionary new technology, nearly tripling our production efficiency and making us the industry leader. Director Lin, you're amazing, the colleagues from the technical department excitedly said. This technology will keep us ahead of our competitors for at least 5 years. I smiled and said, this is the result of everyone's collective efforts. However, we must still be careful to keep it confidential, as this technology was hard-won. Nevertheless, the ambitious Li Ming was not ready to give up. He began to inquire about the secrets of our factory through his former colleagues. Lao Wang, I hear your factory is doing well lately, Li Ming asked casually, pretending to be disinterested. Any new technologies? Lao Wang gave him a wary look. Li Ming, why are you asking about this? Li Ming chuckled awkwardly. It's nothing, just curious. After all these years of friendship, don't you trust me? I had anticipated Li Ming's move and had set a trap in advance. I had Lao Wang deliberately leak some classified information, which was actually carefully crafted disinformation. Sure enough, Li Ming took the bait. He sneaked into the factory under the cover of night, intending to steal technical data. Just as he was smugly holding the classified documents, security guards suddenly rushed out from all directions. Li Ming, you're under arrest, the security captain barked. You're suspected of stealing trade secrets. Li Ming's face turned pale, and his legs went weak. No, it's not like that. At that moment, Hu Xiaoyan somehow got wind of the news and showed up at the factory gate. Ha ha ha, she cackled. Li Ming, you're such a loser. Even stealing something could get you caught. Li Ming looked at Hu Xiaoyan in despair. Xiaoyan, how could you? Hu Xiaoyan sneered. I came to see you make a fool of yourself. Do you really think you can make a comeback? Dream on. Just as everyone thought Li Ming was about to be sent to prison, I suddenly spoke up. Wait, I don't intend to pursue Li Ming's responsibility. The entire room erupted in commotion. I walked up to Li Ming, looking down at him. Li Ming, do you know what you stole? Li Ming shook his head blankly. I opened the folder, and inside were a pile of waste paper and blank sheets. This is the classified information you went to such great lengths to steal, I sneered. I knew you would come to steal it, so I prepared it especially for you. Li Ming collapsed in an instant, kneeling on the ground, tears streaming down his face. Lin Xiaoyu, you're too cruel. I crouched down, looking him straight in the eye. Li Ming, let me teach you a lesson. People should earn their living with real skills. Relying on theft and deception will leave you with nothing in the end. This time, I won't hold you accountable. But I hope you remember this lesson. I stood up. Get out of here, and don't let me see you again. Li Ming stumbled away, leaving the stunned crowd and a furious Hu Xiaoyan behind. I turned to the employees and said, everyone, this incident shows us how crucial technical confidentiality is. From now on, we must all remain vigilant and protect our hard-earned work. Seeing the admiration in everyone's eyes, I silently vowed to myself, in this life, I will live a truly extraordinary and remarkable existence. 3 years have flown by. And under my leadership, our factory has grown into a leading enterprise in the region. Lin Zong, congratulations on our company winning the Best Enterprise of the Year award again, Vice President Zhang Ming said excitedly. I smiled and said, this is the result of the collective efforts of all employees. We must continue to work hard to achieve even greater success. At that moment, a handsome man walked in. His name was Qin Yuan, the president of a well-known investment company. Lin Zong, I've heard so much about you. Qin Yuan extended his hand, his eyes shining with sincerity. I admire your talent and boldness. We had a great conversation and gradually developed feelings for each other. However, fate is always full of drama. On the other side of the city, Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan reunited. Both were down on their luck, and when they saw each other, a flicker of venom flashed in their eyes. It's all Lin Xiaoyu's fault, Li Ming said through gritted teeth. Hu Xiaoyan let out a cold laugh. You only figured that out now. But, I have an idea. They decided to team up against me, plotting to destroy my career and relationships through unscrupulous means. Hu Xiaoyan pretended to repent and actively approached Qin Yuan. Mr. Chen, I'm an old friend of Lin Xiaoyu, she said with feigned warmth. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. I had long anticipated they would make a move, so I set a trap. At the company's annual meeting, I deliberately announced in front of everyone, ladies and gentlemen, I want to express special thanks to someone, my fiancé Qin Yuan. He has provided us with many valuable suggestions. Hearing this, Hu Xiaoyan was overjoyed and immediately rushed to Qin Yuan's side to start ingratiating herself. Just then, Li Ming suddenly burst out from the crowd. Lin Xiaoyu, don't get too smug. I've got your company's confidential documents, and I'm going to ruin you. The crowd was in an uproar. I let out a cold laugh. Oh really? Then go ahead and show me. Li Ming, full of pride, opened the folder, only to find it filled with blank sheets. He was instantly dumbfounded. Ladies and gentlemen, I declared loudly, this is the evidence of someone attempting to steal our company's secrets. Li Ming. Hu Xiaoyan, what do you have to say for yourselves? The security guards immediately stepped forward and apprehended the two. Hu Xiaoyan screamed in defense, it's not my fault. It was all Li Ming's doing. Li Ming roared, you liar. Hu Xiaoyan, it was your idea. Watching the two of them make fools of themselves, the entire room burst into laughter. At this moment, Qin Yuan suddenly knelt on one knee and pulled out a diamond ring. Xiaoyu, your wisdom and courage have captivated me. Will you marry me? I looked at him in surprise. You knew about my plan all along. Qin Yuan smiled and said, we are in sync. How could I not see it? I understand every move you make. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, I nodded with tears in my eyes and accepted. Finally, I felt a sense of relief watching Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan being dragged away by the security guards in such a disheveled state. This time, I chose someone truly worthy of trust, not the one who would only betray me. Li Ming, my wedding with Qin Yuan was held at the most luxurious hotel in the city, with a large crowd of guests and a grand atmosphere. Congratulations, General Manager Lin, and may you and General Manager Chen have a blissful union for 100 years. The employees offered their sincere blessings. I wore a pure white wedding dress, happily leaning against Qin Yuan's side, my heart filled with sweetness. This moment, I finally had the happiness I had never attained in my previous life. However, in a corner of the wedding venue, Li Ming and Hu Xiaoyan were secretly watching. Look at her smug face, Li Ming said through gritted teeth. Sooner or later, I'll make her taste the pain. Hu Xiaoyan let out a cold laugh. Don't rush, opportunities will come. A year into our marriage, my career was thriving, and our relationship was blissful. However, one afternoon, I unexpectedly received a photo of Qin Yuan and his secretary, Xiao Zhang, having an intimate conversation in a cafe. My heart sank. Was history about to repeat itself? Over the next few days, I noticed that Qin Yuan was indeed behaving strangely, often spending time alone with Xiao Zhang, and on several occasions, returning home late at night. Qin Yuan, what's going on with you lately? I asked tentatively. Qin Yuan seemed visibly nervous. Nothing, just busy with work. My doubts were growing stronger. Meanwhile, after Li Ming got wind of this, he started spreading rumors everywhere. Have you heard? Lin Xiaoyu's husband is having an affair. She deserved it. Who asked her to treat me like that back then? Looks like her good times are over. Faced with all the rumors and gossip, I didn't panic but calmly began my investigation. After some covert observation, I discovered that Xiao Zhang often met with a familiar figure. It turned out to be Hu Xiaoyan. I see, I exclaimed, realization dawning on me. It's a trap. I immediately found Qin Yuan and told him about my discovery. To my surprise, Qin Yuan wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he seemed relieved. Xiaoyu, he said, I was just about to tell you this. It turned out that Qin Yuan had long suspected there was a mole in the company, and Xiao Zhang was his planted undercover agent, tasked with luring out the mastermind. Their apparent closeness was a ruse to make the real mole let their guard down. I didn't want to worry you, so I didn't tell you in advance, Qin Yuan said guiltily. I never expected it to be Hu Xiaoyan behind it all. I gripped Qin Yuan's hand tightly. Let's solve this problem together. We set a trap, pretending our marriage was in trouble, to lure Hu Xiaoyan and Xiao Zhang into the open. At a company banquet, Hu Xiaoyan couldn't hold back and publicly taunted me. Lin Xiaoyu, I hear your husband is cheating. How pitiful. I feigned pain and lowered my head, while Qin Yuan pretended to be angry and left the table. Just as Hu Xiaoyan was basking in her triumph, I suddenly looked up and sneered, Hu Xiaoyan, the game is over. The security guard brought Xiao Zhang in, who was holding a recording. Hu Xiaoyan, here is the evidence of you instructing me to get close to President Chen and sabotage their marriage. Hu Xiaoyan's face turned pale. You betrayed me. Xiao Zhang sneered. I've been on Chen's side from the beginning. It's your own stupidity that you couldn't see it. Qin Yuan walked over to me, tightly holding my hand. Xiaoyu, I'm sorry for making you worry. I smiled and shook my head. I trust you, always have. Watching Hu Xiaoyan being escorted away by security in such a disheveled state, Qin Yuan and I exchanged a knowing smile. This crisis not only didn't destroy our marriage but made our bond even stronger. After Hu Xiaoyan's scheme was exposed, Li Ming didn't stop there. He successfully landed a job as a technical consultant for our biggest competitor, Honda Machinery, by falsifying his resume and technical certificates. Mr. Lin, this is bad. Zhang Ming rushed into my office. Honda Machinery has poached 3 of our key clients. In the following days, our company faced a series of setbacks. Orders were stolen, equipment malfunctioned, and raw material supplies were disrupted. A cascade of problems followed. This isn't a coincidence, Qin Yuan frowned. Someone must be pulling strings behind the scenes. Sure enough, not long after, Li Ming appeared in a media interview, serving as a technical consultant for Honda Machinery. Honda Machinery is about to launch a revolutionary new product, Li Ming said triumphantly. It will definitely teach some companies relying on family backgrounds a lesson in failure. This blatant provocation ignited a fire of anger in me. But I didn't act rashly. Xiaoyu, don't be angry, Qin Yuan comforted me. He's trying to provoke you, to make you lose your cool. I calmed down and started investigating Li Ming's background. Soon, I found a crucial clue. Li Ming didn't have the technical qualifications or work experience he claimed. It was all fake. This is his weakness, I told Qin Yuan. But we can't expose him too soon. We need to wait for the right moment. I began secretly gathering evidence. Li Ming's forged certificates, fake work history, plagiarized technical plans. Everything was meticulously documented. Meanwhile, our company has been quietly adjusting our strategy to counter Honda Machinery's malicious competition. Finally, the annual industry exhibition has arrived. It is the most important event in the industry, attended by all major clients and media. On the day of the exhibition, Li Ming stood at the Honda Machinery booth, introducing their upcoming revolutionary new product to the crowd. This technology was entirely developed by me alone, Li Ming said arrogantly. It will completely reshape the entire industry. At that moment, I stepped forward, holding a stack of documents. Li Ming, are you sure this is your independently developed technology? Li Ming's face changed. Of course, are you questioning me? I let out a cold laugh and turned to everyone present. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to expose a fraud. I began to present the evidence one by one. Li Ming's forged academic certificates, plagiarized technical plans, and fabricated work experience. This is your pride and joy at Honda Machinery, I said sarcastically, a fraud who doesn't even understand the basic technical principles. Li Ming turned pale and stammered in defense. You're lying, this is all fake. I played my final card, Li Ming's personally signed technical proposal, filled with elementary mistakes. These mistakes are so basic that even a beginner wouldn't make them, I said coldly. Li Ming, the game is over. The clients and media present were in an uproar. The head of Honda Machinery turned pale with anger and announced on the spot the termination of their cooperation with Li Ming. Li Ming completely broke down, kneeling on the ground and sobbing uncontrollably. Lin Xiaoyu, why are you doing this to me? I looked down at him. This is what you asked for. Li Ming, you'll never learn to earn a living with real skills. After the exhibition incident, Li Ming's nightmare had only just begun. Honda Machinery sued him for fraud and demanded substantial compensation. Li Ming is suspected of fraud and has been taken away by the police for investigation, the news anchor said gravely. If convicted, he faces up to 7 years in prison. After hearing the news, Hu Xiaoyan immediately distanced herself from Li Ming. She married a nouveau riche, thinking she had found a protector, but she didn't realize this man only treated her like a servant in the house. Hu Xiaoyan, mop the floor clean, her husband barked. And tonight, when my friends come over, you better serve them well. Hu Xiaoyan knelt on the floor, tears streaming down her face as she scrubbed the tiles. Remembering her former pride and ambition, she couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This was the consequence of her betrayal of everyone. My company gained significant recognition after that exhibition, with orders pouring in. 3 years later, we became a nationally renowned machinery manufacturing enterprise and won a National Science and Technology Progress Award. Mr. Lin, congratulations. The leader warmly shook my hand at the award ceremony. Your company has made outstanding contributions to our country's machinery manufacturing industry. I smiled as I accepted the trophy, filled with pride. All of this was achieved through my genuine abilities and unwavering efforts. Meanwhile, Qin Yuan's and my family life was also happy and fulfilling. I gave birth to a pair of adorable twins, and our family was full of joy. Xiaoyu, you've worked so hard, Qin Yuan said softly, holding me gently. Having a wife and mother like you is the greatest happiness for me and the children. I leaned on his shoulder, filled with gratitude. Thank you for always supporting me, Qin Yuan. I wouldn't have made it this far without you. One day 5 years later, as I walked in the park with the kids, I suddenly saw a ragged homeless man crouching in the corner. When he looked up, I was shocked to realize it was Li Ming. He recognized me too, and his eyes flashed with a mix of emotions: surprise, shame, resentment, and regret. Lin Xiaoyu, he croaked. You're doing well, huh? I calmly looked at him. Li Ming. You're out of prison. He gave a bitter laugh. I got out 3 years ago, but no one wants to hire someone like me. I looked at his haggard face, and the anger I once felt was gone, replaced by a trace of pity. Dad, who is this uncle? My son asked curiously. Qin Yuan held the child's hand. It's nothing, just an old acquaintance of your mother. Li Ming looked at my happy family, filled with regret. Xiaoyu, if I hadn't. I interrupted him. Li Ming, the past is past. I don't hate you. But I won't forgive you either. I took out a few hundred yuan from my wallet and handed it to him. Take it, find a job, and start over. Li Ming trembled as he took the money, tears streaming down his face. Thank you so much. I turned and walked away, holding my child and husband's hands, heading towards a bright future. Behind me was Li Ming kneeling on the ground, his lifelong regret and sorrow. In this life, I am no longer the Lin Xiaoyu who was deceived and abandoned. I have taken control of my own destiny and found true happiness, and Li Ming is forever trapped in the bitter consequences of his own actions, unable to rise again. This is the best retribution. Story 2. In my previous life, I was the Empress of Mu Qingrui, and I lived a truly miserable existence. He was a philanderer, his concubines were arrogant and domineering, his mother was unreasonable, and his grandmother was biased, literally draining me to the point of exhaustion. And my family was even less supportive. My birth mother was weak and easily bullied, my father was excessively biased, my stepmother was cunning and vicious, and my half-sister was shameless, cutting off my last chance at survival. Reborn, I want to say, my father-in-law is quite impressive. Being his wife this lifetime will definitely crush my enemies, just like my previous life. I went to the palace immediately to lodge a complaint with the noble consort Chen. The complaint is about her son. My fiancé, Prince Mu Qingrui, during the grand banquet for the princess's birthday, found a secluded spot to secretly meet with my half-sister Ming Wan. The noble consort Chen planned to, as she had done before, lecture me on the virtues of dignity, magnanimity, and the 3 obediences and 4 virtues to brush me off. But this time, I cleared my throat and quickly squeezed out a couple of tears. Your Highness, I wouldn't usually say anything, but today. The crown prince secretly met with my half-sister, and it was witnessed by the grand princess's people. The grand princess is the emperor's paternal aunt and holds a prestigious position within the royal family. She has always been at odds with the pure concubine, and as a result, she has never shown much favor to Mu Qingrui either. With such a significant piece of leverage, it would be a waste not to stir up some trouble. My half-sister still holds the title of a maiden. Before the dust settles, all maidens are considered the emperor's women. The crime of coveting the father's chosen one is a grave offense for a prince. The pure concubine shuddered, also feeling fear. At that moment, Mu Qingrui limped in. He saw me, his eyes blazing with anger, and grabbed a vase to hurl at me. I pretended to be scared and dodged, pulling the pure consort in front of me as a shield. There was a loud ouch as the pure consort's head was hit, creating a rather picturesque scene. I held back again and again, managing not to laugh out loud. This was truly a dog-eat-dog show, and my eyes darkened with satisfaction. At this time in my previous life, Mu Qingrui was arrogant, and Chen Guifei was domineering. The two of them worked in tandem to paint me as a jealous and suspicious shrew. Mother, why are you siding with outsiders? Do you know what she did? When I was at my aunt's residence, she sent people to beat me up. There were 4 of them, and they knocked out 2 of my teeth. Mu Qingruwei put on a pitiful face, still holding 2 broken teeth in his hand. I quickly took out a handkerchief to cover my face, hiding my gloating smile, and silently gave a thumbs up to my 4 martial maids in my heart. In my past life, I was too naive. When I discovered his secret rendezvous with my half-sister, I merely slipped away quietly, heartbroken. This time, I didn't hold back. I ordered 4 martial maids to lay into them, beating my half-sister into a swollen mess and making him cry for his mother and curse his father. As I was happily reminiscing, the pure consort let out a shriek of my son, and rushed over. Trembling as she clutched Mu Qingrui's hand, she turned to glare at me, her eyes icy cold, and her face so dark it could drip with anger. I sighed deeply. This was her typical wicked mother-in-law face, always assuming it was my fault without any reason. Only in my previous life was I blind enough to believe she could treat me like her own daughter. I was prepared for this situation and immediately pretended to wipe away tears. Your Highness, I had no choice. Scolding my half-sister for her lack of manners was to prevent others from recognizing her at a glance. Beating the crown prince was just a way to divert everyone's attention to my supposed jealousy and pettiness, but this can only deceive for a short time. Your Highness must still act justly and denounce your own family, expressing your stance to the emperor. The pure concubine indeed pondered deeply. I seized the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. On my way here, I heard that the Grand Princess also plans to come to the palace. The court is currently discussing the matter of the Crown Prince. Sometimes, words don't need to be many. A wise person understands with just a hint. The pure concubine's eyes suddenly narrowed, and she immediately made up her mind. She abruptly turned her head, summoning 4 burly eunuchs who firmly restrained Mu Qingruwei, carrying him to the veranda and forcing him onto the spring bench. As the board fell, the pig-like screams echoed far and wide, and Mu Qingrui's face contorted rapidly, a sight that filled me with immense satisfaction. My gaze was dark, and when my martial maids beat him, they used precise force, striking deep without leaving any visible marks. Now, this beating has become the perfect cover. He'll need to recover, and it will be at least 3 months before he can get out of bed. But these are just the beginning. After dealing with the palace, it's time to deal with the family's demons. My half-sister Mingwan is trembling in her mother Hua's arms, her tears filling several vats. It seems my martial maid delivered the message perfectly. They finally realize they should be afraid. The father paced irritably around the room, his hopeful gaze immediately landing on me as I entered. In the strained expression on his face, there was still a hint of affection. I only felt disgust. He had always favored others, because the second concubine was his white moonlight, and as a result, Mingwan became his precious darling, while my mother and I were dispensable. In my previous life, he not only indulged his concubine and neglected his wife, forcing my mother to die in the temple, but also used the entire clan's resources to support Mingwan as a royal consort, making my life in the palace extremely difficult. I've never seen such a good complexion before. Remembering the past, my gaze grew colder. Shattering his illusions directly, even the pure consort has tortured the first prince, and now not only can my second sister not participate in the selection, but she will also have to endure great suffering. Only a serious illness or death can quell the emperor's wrath. Upon hearing this, Auntie Hua didn't even dare to cry. She quickly grabbed her father, shyly called out "Master," and then glanced at me. Her father coughed awkwardly, looking at me with guilt, and suggested, "Why don't you take her place?" A legitimate daughter participating would show greater sincerity. Currently, the eldest prince, Mu Qingruwei, has come of age, while the other princes are still either infants or young children. Moreover, with the emperor's health declining in recent days, the calls to make Mu Qingruwei the crown prince have grown louder. The current list of candidates for the selection is also seen as a form of alignment by the various families. Even if the daughter of the first wife or a highly valued family member is not selected, it still demonstrates loyalty to the throne. In this way, the lack of ambition in some of the other children in the family becomes a minor issue. They've got it all figured out. But there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. I put on a smug face and sneered. It's not impossible for me to become this maiden, but my sister's illness will likely require her to stay in the family nunnery for 3 to 5 years. Auntie Hua, being a doting mother, will naturally accompany her. As for the household duties, that will have to fall on my mother's shoulders. Upon hearing my words, Auntie Hua's face turned ashen. She glared at me, struggling for a moment before forcing a smile and flattering, "That's only right, I know her plan. She's just waiting for me to be rejected so she can make a comeback. Unfortunately, she won't get that chance." That ended with my coronation decree. I had drawn the emperor's phoenix. The is a royal tradition passed down through generations. It is said that any noble lady who draws the sole emperor's swallow token at the selection banquet must enter the central palace within 3 months, or else misfortune will befall. Throughout the ages, several predecessors have proven and validated this for me, all in accordance with the will of heaven. Therefore, regardless of my past status, even if the emperor does not favor me, I must now be crowned empress, unless, of course, he wishes to curse himself to an early death. When the whole family knelt to receive the imperial decree, Auntie Hua was the first to cry out, repeatedly shouting that it was impossible. Mingwan wailed loudly, skipping even her usual pretentiousness. My father stood there in a daze until the eunuch delivering the decree coughed, prompting him to hastily accept and thank for the decree. These 3 people's intentions, do they think I don't know? They were waiting for me to return after being rejected, so they could continue the path of their previous lives. I chuckled coldly and clapped my hands, and immediately a burly servant woman stepped forward. They held Auntie Hua and Mingwan tightly, gagged them, bound their limbs, and threw them into the carriage. As my father tried to intervene, I sneered. The family nunnery is not clean, it's better to send them far away. And my mother, it's best to bring her back sooner. Father, you need to know that it is your daughter who is to become the empress. I exuded an imposing presence, and with the imperial guards granted by the emperor standing behind me, he could only watch helplessly as his beloved concubine and daughter were taken away. I exhaled deeply, then turned around without a trace of reluctance, climbed into the magnificent carriage, and made my way to Meishing Nunnery. Before the destined phoenix bride enters the palace, she must find a nunnery to fast for 49 days. I chose Meishing Nunnery. Meishing Nunnery is the nunnery of the Grand Princess. By practicing there, I indirectly formed an alliance with the Grand Princess. Everything in the nunnery was in order, and I settled in peacefully. Each day, the morning and evening bells brought me a sense of tranquility, yet beneath this calm, a hidden current was gathering strength. Indeed, on the last night in the nunnery, I was deep in sleep when suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my neck. Auntie Hua and Mingwan somehow broke in, like vengeful ghosts, while all my martial maids had fallen unconscious. Miss, the decree to establish the empress has been issued. The emperor can marry your spirit tablet into the palace to avoid the calamity, but since the grand ceremony was never completed, my Wanner can still marry into the crown prince's residence. Auntie Hua smiled triumphantly, and Mingwan beside her looked coy and bashful. I coughed and struggled. If I die, the emperor will never let you off. The emperor is naturally inauspicious for wives. Your death is only to be expected. Besides, if something happens to you here, it's the grand princess who will bear the brunt of the blame. Don't worry, Lady Chen has everything arranged. Seeing my breathing grow more labored, Auntie Hua thought she had the situation completely under control and became carried away with her triumph. Pressed against my throat, I found myself drifting off. They are malicious in their thoughts, yet foolish and ignorant, acting as mere pawns while taking pride in their role. Heh, I forced a smile. As the laughter faded, the flickering candlelight by the bed flickered once more, and the lamp went out as the white silk snapped. When the room was lit again, I had already been rescued, and Madame Hua and her men were all bound and lying on the ground. The Grand Princess stood nearby, her face ashen with anger, though the satisfaction in her eyes did not escape mine. It was the satisfaction of catching her opponent off guard, and she grew even warmer towards me, sharing a sense of camaraderie in our mutual disdain. Auntie Hua watched all this with a look of terror. Even someone as dim-witted as her could see that she had long been caught in the trap. I didn't give her a chance to beg for mercy. Directly picking up the charcoal and pressing it against her face, she let out a horrific scream, rolling on the ground in agony. I coldly watched her humiliation, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction, while memories of my mother protecting me and being accidentally burned by her with an iron poker surged in my mind. Without that beautiful face, let's see how she pretends to be weak and wins her father's heart. Did you originally plan to burn down this house? After dealing with Hua's concubine, I turned to Mingwan. She was trembling like a sieve, her fear causing her to sob uncontrollably. In such extreme panic, there was not a trace of beauty left. If we're going to burn, let's make the fire even bigger. The Grand Princess, fearing chaos, signaled her subordinates to spread diesel all around. As the fire roared to life, thick black smoke billowed far into the distance, watching the towering flames. The Grand Princess stood shoulder to shoulder with me. I turned my head to apologize. In the end, I have wronged the Grand Princess, destroying your temple. The Grand Princess waved her hand nonchalantly, her eyebrows and eyes relaxed, and she chuckled. Look, by tomorrow, the capital should be abuzz with rumors that someone doesn't want you to survive to enter the palace as empress, or perhaps, they hope the emperor will never have an empress. The fire at Meishing Nunnery burned almost half the sky. The rumors in Kyoto had already spread in waves, from private feuds within the households to palace intrigues. By the time the common folks' interest waned, the empress's coronation was already upon them. Ever since my return from Meishing Nunnery, my father seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. Concubine Hua, disfigured and barely clinging to life, and my half-sister Mingwan, traumatized to the point of seeming like a fool. He clearly knew it was my doing, yet he could only swallow his pride and endure the humiliation. Even as I boarded the empress's palanquin, I shed a few crocodile tears out of sorrow. Well, the freshly minted father-in-law of the emperor, at the moment of switching identities and confirming the rupture with old allies, indeed deserves a mix of emotions. As the palanquin moved away, I left the past behind, and before me, the morning light revealed the majestic main gate of the imperial city. Moments later, the emperor arrived in his dragon palanquin. His brow bore the marks of a man in his 40s, yet with the youthful vigor stripped away, he had accumulated a steady strength over the years. I stared intently, watching my father-in-law from my previous life, the husband I had painstakingly secured in this one. As the eunuch presented the lengthy decree from the Department of State Affairs, I heard nothing, my mind blank, until the moment he took my hand, and a small, desperate hope stirred within me. With a new beginning and a changed future, everything is different now that my identity has shifted. The coronation ceremony was nearing its end after the Phoenix seal was bestowed and the heavens, earth, and ancestors were duly informed. The Phoenix Hall was already brightly lit, and by the time they officially retired, the moon had already set in the west. In this beautiful moment, the emperor dismissed everyone and then took out a bamboo tube. The bamboo tube contained dozens of fortune sticks, one of which was painted red at the top. I took it directly, shook it with one hand, and after several rounds, I shook out the most conspicuous one. He seemed to have anticipated it, but he was still somewhat shocked upon seeing the truth. Who would have thought that my empress has such skills? I smiled warmly. If I didn't have such skills, it wouldn't be worth your risk, giving up so many undercover agents just to slip that already removed imperial fortune stick back in without anyone noticing. Yes, we had already cooperated. Since my rebirth, all I've been thinking about is how to avoid repeating the same mistakes. I have become adept at the life of an empress, and even if I were to be reborn, I would still choose to navigate the familiar waters. The thought of becoming Mu Qingrui's empress again makes me feel sick. Once Mu Qingrui is rejected, his father, the current emperor, inevitably comes into view. The current emperor ascended the throne as a young, illegitimate son, and was controlled by his empress dowager for over a decade during the regency. After finally taking power, the influence of the maternal relatives had already become unmanageable. The previous reign was already like this, and the harem without an emperor was even more so the domain of the empress dowager and her close niece, the pure consort. As for heirs, only the crown prince Mu Qingrui has come of age, and he happens to be the pure consort's own son, who was raised to be closer to his maternal family. Nearly 40 years old with no legitimate heir, the harem in turmoil, and the chaos of the succession crisis rocking the court. All his rivals align almost perfectly with my past enemies. Choosing him as an ally and becoming his empress is my goal, and it is also my destined fate in this life. It turns out I made the right choice. I still remember our first encounter, which took place in the imperial garden. The pure consort secretly met with her brother to plot how to incite the ministers to push for an early establishment of the heir. They also discussed alliances and schemes to bring my father into their plan. At that moment, we were hiding behind a rockery. His breathing was so shallow. Even though he was seething with anger, he made no sound at all. I admired his restraint. While he was amazed by my boldness, after the pure consort left, I boldly looked at him and extended an invitation to form an alliance. If you choose me as your empress, I can guarantee that my father will switch sides to support you, and I can also ensure that I control the harem. He smiled coldly, as if mocking my overconfidence, laughing at my presumption to aim for the sky just because I was about to become the crown prince's principal wife. I maintained a serious expression, my bright eyes filled with determination. It was only then that he took me seriously, leaving me with the words, "If you can temporarily stop the turmoil over the succession, and if you can make your father willingly send you to the selection, I will give you a hand." I calmly agreed, and we covered for each other as we returned to the banquet. He raised his glass toward me from a distance, and I returned the gesture subtly. The distant connection marked the beginning of our wager. Next, I orchestrated the incident at the Grand Princess's residence. The combination of the pure consort's punishment and my tantrum successfully kept the Crown Prince bedridden for months. With the rightful heir lying ill in bed, how could the minister's joint petition be justified? As for my family, my father, who has always been partial, believed in the slander of Aunt Hua and replaced my younger sister's maiden status. And Aunt Hua, driven by her deep love for her daughter, sent herself to the nunnery. Having successfully entered the palace for the selection, he naturally fulfilled his promise. Reflecting on these days of planning, he sincerely praised, "Zitong, you are both wise and loyal, but I wonder if your father's heart is as true as yours. Although my father is a scoundrel, he is a capable minister with a wide network of students, which is why the Empress Dowager was so eager to recruit him. Before, he might have been able to play both sides. But after the Battle of Meixingen, his power can only be fully utilized by me. In the fire at Meixingen, I gave my father a big gift. Those sent by the pure consort to assist Aunt Hua in her endeavors were all turned over to the capital's yamen in my father's name. On the eve of my wedding, I confronted him again in the study. I spoke confidently. The emperor is in the prime of his life, and it's not impossible for him to have another legitimate son. Moreover, the princes will eventually grow up, and the court factions will surely continue. Is father really going to take sides early and strive for a secondary position under the S family? Father's eyes flickered, and after countless schemes, all turned into a deep sigh. The crown prince, the emperor's eyes flickered upon hearing this. He looked down at me, his gaze flickering. I understood his thoughts. His empress had been unable to bear an heir, and he had long since given up hope. Hearing these words from my mouth now, he was naturally caught off guard. The phrase legitimate son lingered on his lips, instantly adding an air of ambiguity. I am no longer a naive girl, and this is certainly not the time to be shy when we are sharing our hearts. I nodded openly. Yes, I need an heir. That is my future guarantee and the foundation of my father's loyalty. He was stunned for a moment, then suddenly burst into hearty laughter. There was no mockery, no teasing, just pure, unadulterated joy. He exclaimed good, 3 times, his eyes gleaming with even more intensity. Rest now. 1,000 words condensed into the most direct action. He extended his hand to me, inviting me toward the bed. I finally felt a tinge of shyness, yet still firmly grasped his hand. If we could consummate our marriage and I could conceive early, even if he were to pass away as he did in my previous life 5 years from now, I wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. I miscalculated slightly. The physique nurtured with deer blood and ginseng, though not exactly youthful, is still vigorous and robust. After the night, when I woke up with a sore back, the emperor had already left ahead of me. He went to the morning court session, and I should sit upright, waiting for his concubines to come and pay their respects. The noble consort led the way, her head held high with arrogance, but no amount of heavy makeup could hide the dark circles under her eyes. It's no wonder she couldn't sleep. The daughter-in-law she was about to gain had suddenly become her mistress. I suppressed my delight and pretended to exchange polite words with her. For so many years, I hear you've been managing the palace on behalf, which must have been quite taxing. You can finally take a well-deserved rest now. She was already struggling to hold herself together, and when she heard the mention of rest, she nearly lost control of her volume. Your Majesty, you've just arrived, so you might not be fully aware yet, whether you understand or not. From now on, you won't have to worry about it. Sister noble consort, if you have time, you might as well focus on finding a suitable wife for the Grand Prince, so you can enjoy the joys of having grandchildren sooner. The mention of sister highlighted her concubine status, and enjoying the joys of grandchildren pointed to her aging. Her face turned purple with anger, but she knew her place and didn't dare to react immediately. I pretended not to notice and turned to chat and laugh with the other consorts. After greeting all the consorts, I ordered the rewards to be distributed. The rewards were distributed, and a bracelet was given to the pure consort. She was so furious her eyes went wide. And for good reason. This bracelet was the one she had once given me to symbolize the harmony between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Now, using it as a gift for our first meeting, she was livid all over again. Soon after, all the princes and princesses arrived. Mu Qingrui, as the eldest prince, came last. To outsiders, it's just an old injury recovering, so he's still a bit unsteady on his feet. I know what's on his mind, his wife becoming his stepmother. He suffered more than the pure concubine ever did. He has no intention of submitting to me. He just plans to blend in with the crowd and get through it. However, since he's going to suffer, he might as well do it thoroughly. I put on a loving smile and beckoned him over. Ah, it's my dear firstborn. Come, let your mother have a good look at you. Mu Qingrui's teeth ground together at the words, a prince must kneel before the empress. As long as his legs are intact, but looking at my face, there's no way he could genuinely bend down. Still, I had patience. I sipped my tea leisurely, waiting for him to kneel before I looked up with concern and smiled. I hear you were injured recently. Are you fully recovered now? Thank you for your concern, mother. I am fine, he replied with difficulty, swallowing his teeth and blood. Just as there was a crunch, cough, the newly installed false tooth was bitten off again, without turning around. I could feel the murderous intent of the pure consort barely concealed, but now I am in power, and swallowing insults is not my style. I immediately straightened up, turned the gun towards her, and began to lecture sternly. Consort Chun, I hear that you ordered someone to injure the first prince. Although you are his birth mother, he is still of imperial blood. If he commits a mistake, it is up to the empress and the emperor to punish him. If you overstep your authority again, I will not let you off lightly. The empress's reprimand left Consort Chun no choice but to kneel and beg for forgiveness. She and Mu Qingrui knelt together, both looking ashen. I am content, Reborn, standing above them once again. I should act as I please. They are not worthy of my compromise. Before I knew it, it was time to pay my respects at the Palace of Kindness. The Empress Dowager had heard of my display at the Hall of Imperial Grace, the moment I entered. She put on the face of a wicked mother-in-law. A queen should govern with virtue. On your first day in power, you reprimanded the concubines, committing a grave sin of jealousy. How can you possibly uphold the dignity of the empress? I can understand her resentment. The family she painstakingly chose for Mu Qingrui has now become the emperor's ally. She failed to kill me and now faces the loss of power in the harem. But in our first encounter, I cannot afford to lose. If the harem is not entirely under my control, the consequences will be dire. So, I stood up, first humbly confessing my fault, and then immediately turned to scold the pure consort. Pure consort, the Empress Dowager asks you, why did you flog the Grand Prince recently? Do you still recognize the hierarchy and order? The pure consort was already half-dazed by the Empress Dowager's words, and now being suddenly called out by me, she was quite startled. I remained calm and composed. Since the Empress Dowager said my scolding was out of jealousy, I'll bring the matter to the forefront and see who dares to mention the real reason Mu Qingrui was beaten. Indeed, both of them had expressions of extreme discomfort. The Empress Dowager felt a knot of resentment in her chest and could only save face by saying, forget it, I was just asking casually. I was happy to end the first confrontation on a high note. Moments later, the Empress Dowager was not giving up and approached from another angle. The Empress is new to the palace and likely feels lost when it comes to managing the inner affairs. Although the authority is yours, to ensure a smooth transition and peace in the harem, you will still need the help of the old hands. Upon hearing this, the noble consort, always quick to complain but slow to learn, started voicing her grievances again. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager. The Empress just instructed me that I no longer need to concern myself with matters in the future. With this back and forth, the Empress Dowager regained some of her composure. I followed suit. Mother, although managing the palace affairs is the duty of the Empress, I am well aware of my limited experience, which is why I have appointed the Consort of Virtue and the Consort of Virtue to assist me. The Empress Dowager's attempt to muddy the waters and slow my control over the palace must first pass my approval. Look, I don't monopolize power, and the two consorts I've appointed are indeed capable. One comes from a neutral but influential family, the other is the Emperor's confidant. The Empress Dowager's face stiffened, still unwilling to give up. After all, I am more familiar with Consort Chun. I remained silent. Then after a while, I raised a dignified smile. Forgive me, mother. But I cannot and dare not use Consort Chun. Bold and audacious, the Empress Dowager raged, her morning's pent-up frustration finally finding an outlet. She ordered me to kneel, and as I silently counted the time, a pair of hands finally lifted me up just as my knees began to bend. The late-arriving Grand Princess yanked me up and seated herself regally on the high seat, her eyelids flicking disdainfully as she sneered, Sister-in-law, you're being a bit too protective of your own niece. Turning back, he reprimanded the pure concubine, you love to stir up trouble like this, but I wonder whose power you're relying on. These words hit hard, and both the Empress Dowager and the pure concubine turned pale. The Empress Dowager was somewhat better, huffing and turning her head away to avoid seeing the scene. As a minor figure in this battle, the pure concubine could only bang her head repeatedly. The Grand Princess continued her tirade, Sister-in-law. The Empress can appoint whoever she wants. Is it just because Lady Chen is your own niece that you insist on pushing her into the position? If that's the case, why not just depose the Empress, or perhaps, that fire was your doing, to clear the way for the Empress's throne. Nonsense. The Empress Dowager was indeed furious, too busy glaring at the Grand Princess to scold me. The Grand Princess wasn't intimidated at all, focusing only on her red cardamom. She was the biological sister of the late Emperor, while the Empress Dowager was only his second wife. In terms of status, she was more prestigious. The underlings all fell silent, an awkward atmosphere spreading throughout the room, until the Emperor finally brought it to a close, hurrying off after the court session. He took the art of muddling through to its extreme. A concubine should act like a concubine, causing discord among the masters of the harem. What do you think you're doing? You should be confined and reflect on your actions. The pure consort was stunned, tears even streaming down her face, however, flowing down her no longer youthful skin. It hardly evoked any sympathy. I quietly looked around, first avoiding the Grand Princess's gaze, then winking at the Emperor. Yes, finding the right partner makes cooperation a pleasure. Only when we returned to the Phoenix Hall did the Emperor show a hint of fatigue, occasionally coughing. I nervously observed his expression and promptly offered him tea. In my previous life, his health was always poor, and he died early from illness 5 years later, but my life is already intertwined with his. He must take good care of himself, at least until I safely give birth, until I fully control the harem, and until he cleans up the court even more thoroughly. To achieve this goal, I earnestly advised, today, I officially declared war on the. Things will only get more intense from here. This will give you even more room to maneuver in the court. Rest assured, my father can handle those tactics. The conflicts in the harem extend to the court, where the external relatives of the and the will inevitably clash. I never hesitate to use my father. If he wants to solidify his position as the Emperor's father-in-law, he must put in the effort. When the two forces collide, that's the Emperor's opportunity. There's one more thing I didn't elaborate on, but I could take it slow. I'm just afraid I don't have enough time. My rebirth has changed too much. Only by quickly consolidating power in my own hands can I feel at ease. Seeing that I was competent, he didn't say much more, only cautioned, you need to be even more careful. The Empress Dowager has many tricks. I'm not afraid of that. The palace may seem full of schemes, but the core ones are actually limited. It was because I was the Empress for Mu Qingrui, that scoundrel who was lecherous and shameless, always favoring concubines over his wife, that I was constantly hindered. Now things are different. I hold the power, and my allies are quite reliable. Through such back-and-forth maneuvering, they repeatedly suffered setbacks and finally pulled out her trump card, pretending to be ill. Thus, the duty of attending to her illness was scheduled. I sighed inwardly. They truly are aunt and niece, for once they become mothers-in-law. Their methods of tormenting others are the same. In my past life, after the noble and virtuous concubine ascended to the position of Empress Dowager, she always looked at me with displeasure and often used the pretext of attending to her illness to confine me in Feng Xiai Palace. For the sake of a virtuous reputation, I endured her all night long, while she slept soundly during the day, leaving me to handle the busy palace affairs. Mu Qingrui was inherently fickle, and seeing my haggard appearance, he indulged even more extravagantly in the harem. Reborn. I'm going to have bad luck, and no one is getting away. I summoned all the concubines and arranged them in order of their ranks. The Empress Dowager was intent on making my life difficult, so she certainly wouldn't let me slack off. I immediately brought the Emperor into the picture, ordering him to dine at the Feng Xiai Palace every evening. This meant that whoever attended to the Emperor's illness would have the opportunity for close interaction with him. This was an opportunity too good to pass up, and the concubines were eager to seize it. Even the noble consort Chen's eyes sparkled with anticipation. The Empress Dowager would act out whenever others served her, but she would feel completely at ease when the pure consort was present. Eventually, she would only want the pure consort by her side. There was much grumbling in the harem, and everyone clenched their teeth in anger when mentioning the pure consort. I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. When the Emperor came to see me, the radiant joy on my face was impossible to hide. I shared my recent gains with him. It's rare for the pure consort to be so busy vying for favor, leaving me free to make a grand display of my skills. These days, being an emperor isn't easy either. When necessary, sacrificing one's charms is inevitable, riding on his momentum. I've already figured out the backers of the various supervisors, now that the enemy is in the open and I'm in the shadows. When to strike depends entirely on my mood. He gently, also in the mood for some teasing. If we keep cooperating like this, aren't you afraid the pure consort might get pregnant? Finally, I remembered the important task of having a child. Another day ended, and after the Empress Dowager had finished dinner with the Emperor and the pure consort, she smiled warmly and urged them to rest together. I made a grand entrance, pulling the emperor's hand and leaving. My excuse was even more grandiose. The emperor and empress had urgent matters to discuss, matters of great importance, and no details could be disclosed. I clearly remember the pure consorts, truly a sight to behold. I was so lost in the moment that even as I ascended the steps, I continued to savor it. The emperor suddenly stopped, turned to look at me with an unusually serious gaze, and after a long pause, dismissed everyone before asking me in a low voice, "Are you happy? Are you content to be my empress?" "Of course," I replied quickly, although marrying the emperor was for his power. "Now that I'm married, I must give my whole heart sincerely. Only with hearts aligned can we conquer the world." I held his hand earnestly and firmly said, "Marrying you is the best decision I've ever made. He's so good, not frivolous, not suspicious, knows when to advance and when to retreat, and abides by the rules." With the promise of the alliance, I was placed on an equal footing. Respected and carefully guarded. He laughed, a contented laugh, his eyes bright and his expression gentle. He was quite good-looking, though no longer full of youthful vigor. His calm and confident demeanor, revealed through his leisurely attire, exuded an air of superiority and detachment. I was so captivated that I didn't realize he was looking at me until I finally snapped out of it. My face flushed at this reaction. I secretly scolded myself, though my body was delicate. My heart was already past the age of youthful infatuation. Instinctively, I added, "Your Majesty, shall we retire early? To conceive a child, if the firstborn is a princess, we'll need to try again for a second child." He suddenly froze, his earlobes turning slightly red. I didn't get a clear look. Just as I was about to close my eyes, he suddenly pulled me back, and his pace seemed to quicken. While the pure consort was busy vying for favor, the first chicken I used to clean up the harem emerged. After I swiftly and cleanly dealt with the matter, the Empress Dowager also sensed the implications. Then, the nth step of mischief is also quite cliché. The timing of the astrologer's words was impeccable. My stars clash with the Empress Dowager's, necessitating that one of us leave the palace to avoid calamity. Humility before dignity. It stands to reason that I must leave. The Empress Dowager shed crocodile tears, coughing dramatically as she pledged her loyalty to the emperor. "It's just a few more coughs, Your Majesty. The Empress has only just taken over the palace affairs and is beginning to get the hang of it. If she leaves, who could step in so quickly? She played hard to get so well. She even had an escape plan ready." As she said this, the pure consort was meticulously reviewing the accounts of the Phoenix Palace, with not a single error. My mind raced, plotting strategies, when suddenly the emperor clutched his chest and collapsed straight down. Everyone was shocked, but I was even more terrified, my face turning pale. I hadn't secured everything yet. He couldn't die. I was the first to rush over and catch him firmly. The court physician, already on hand, stammered for a while, only managing to say something about overwork. Tears were hanging on my eyelashes when suddenly my palm itched. I had a sudden realization and saw his eyelashes flutter slightly. Indeed, the emperor was feigning illness. With this ruse, the Empress Dowager's plans were temporarily put on hold. My heart was rippling as I fed him medicine and discussed with him, "The Empress Dowager is getting old. Constantly plotting in the palace is really too taxing on her body. You don't need to take the lead in this matter. It's more suitable for your aunt's status." He understood immediately and smiled affectionately. My heart trembled. After getting used to betrayal and disappointment, the feeling of being protected is truly wonderful. Although I didn't need to take the lead, I still talked to my father. The next steps require the support of the previous court. Since he is now bound to me, he must do his utmost for me. Soon, rumor spread among the people. The Grand Princess further fueled the fire, submitting an open petition stating that the Empress is the destined Phoenix, entrusted with the duty to protect the Emperor's safety. How could she be easily separated from the Emperor's side? Although the Empress Dowager holds a noble position, the Emperor's well-being is the foundation of the entire realm. The people my father arranged followed closely behind. After all, the title of the destined Phoenix was resounding, whether sincere or insincere. All hoped that the Empress Dowager would reconsider, not just for herself, but more importantly, for the Emperor, and should leave the palace sooner. With this high-handed move, the Empress Dowager, even if reluctant, would have to leave the palace. I happily issued an edict, stating that since the pure consort served with great care, she must stay close to the Empress Dowager to ensure continuity. The palace finally quieted down, making it smoother for me to remove obstacles and place my own people, and I also had more time to spend with the Emperor. since we were still in the honeymoon period and I was eager to have a child. Whenever he came, I wasn't foolish enough to pretend to be demure and virtuous, pushing him away. The longer we spend together, the better we understand each other. He is not a good-for-nothing like Mu Qingrui. On the contrary, he is highly knowledgeable and talented. He has profound insights into politics and can effortlessly engage in discussions about romance and beauty. The harmony of minds and the connection of emotions are truly exhilarating. A single glance from him and I understand, a single thought from me and he comprehends. As if returning to the source after being dried up, I find myself increasingly drawn to spending time with him. In our profound exchanges, memories of my past life seem to fade away. However, even in his comfortable life, there were shortcomings. He was passionate about martial arts and would visit the training ground every few days. I watched with apprehension, fearing he might overdo it and prematurely repeat the mistakes of his past life. Constantly living in fear, I would inadvertently let slip some careless words. "You're getting old, take it easy." The emperor's face darkened instantly, and when it came to bedtime, he became even more determined to work hard. I groaned in frustration. Though eager to have a child, there was no need to work so hard. Life flowed by like water, sweet yet tugging. Soon, the Empress Dowager, who had been away for most of the year, could finally return to the palace. She also brought back a niece from her maternal family, a girl named Jiang Lu, whose delicate and charming beauty lived up to her name. I silently lowered my eyelids, hiding the blade in my eyes. I know this person well. In my past life, she became a concubine of Mu Qingrui, causing no small amount of trouble by relying on the influence. It seems we are destined. In our past lives, we were rivals in love, and now we continue in this one. That is introducing her to me with great fanfare, undoubtedly intending to push her towards the emperor. Indeed, the Empress Dowager spoke up, her face filled with sincerity. The master has calculated for me that this girl's star sign and birth date match mine perfectly. It would be excellent to keep her in the palace. I turned to look at the noble consort Chun, her face already ashen, though she was barely holding it together. It truly is a case of fortune turning like the wind. In my previous life, when the Empress Dowager presented this girl, she was full of affection and advised me to be dignified and magnanimous. Now, when she is presented to her own husband, she can't keep her composure either. I smiled graciously, showing my generosity, and personally led them on a tour of the imperial garden. The route had been meticulously calculated, and before long, I bumped into Mu Qingrui, who was on his way to the palace to pay his respects. After Mu Qingrui had lost face several times in my presence, he always avoided me like a snake or scorpion, but this time, he raised his head, his eyes and legs straight, and he walked directly toward me, not even hesitating with his bow. His eyes kept darting toward Jiang Lu, and the light in his gaze was all too familiar. It was the feverish intensity of a mad dog spotting its prey. In my previous life, my half-sister's path to favor was cut short by this beauty. I coughed softly, pretending to be tired and stepping aside, watching them pull and push from a distance. This place is secluded, and I deliberately blocked the surrounding people. They are a man and a woman, and they once had mutual feelings, so they should show something, shouldn't they? But after just a few casual words, Jiang Lu rushed out in a hurry. In contrast, Mu Qingrui looked utterly forlorn, with a hint of hope and reluctance. TSK, this top-tier little white lotus, has she turned her nose up at Mu Qingrui for this lifetime? Can such delicate beauty easily catch the emperor's eye? I suddenly feel a bit panicked. The panic makes my head spin, and for the first time, I wait outside the imperial hall, waiting for the emperor to finish his court session, so I can take his hand and return to the Phoenix Hall. Then, picking up my pastels, I used all my skills to give him a complete makeover. The eyebrows should droop, the bags under the eyes should be prominent, and the wrinkles should be deep. With this touch-up, the sense of weakness and age was fully captured. Throughout the process, the emperor remained still. He let me do as I pleased, wearing a loving smile that made me feel a bit shy. As compensation, I decided to give him a kiss, but looking at this aged face, I just couldn't pucker my lips. I realized, I too am a sucker for good looks, hoping my husband would be handsome. Should I try to win over this elderly emperor, or just go for the vibrant Mu Qingrui? Even with the instructions, could Jiang Lu's balance tip in that direction? I underestimated Jiang Lu's dedication. Although she was disheartened by the emperor's state during their first audience, she later resumed her affectionate pursuit. The emperor initially rejected her coldly, but eventually became intrigued, especially by her persistence. Every time he summoned her, she would come to me to restore her original appearance, all in the name of seeing how long the other could hold out. The Hall of Imperial Supremacy opened its doors to Jianglu several times. And the Empress Dowager was overjoyed, almost beside herself with happiness. However, the temperament of the pure consort was becoming increasingly volatile, and it was said that several sets of porcelain in her chambers had been smashed. About a month later, I went to the Palace of Eternal Kindness with the Emperor's decree of enfeoffment. First, ennoble Miss Jiang as a beauty, and when she bears offspring in the future, further rewards will be granted, compared to my dejected state. The Empress Dowager was in high spirits. She ordered someone to quickly summon Jiang Lu, but after searching for half a day, only a servant from the Palace of Pure Grace came rushing over, whispering nervously in her ear. I tactfully withdrew, only to encounter her again shortly afterward in a deserted side hall. I forgot to tell Mother that this time, both the Palace of Pure Grace and I played a part in catching the adulterers. I leisurely adjusted my sleeve and, overstepping protocol, entered ahead of her. Inside, Jiang Lu's disheveled appearance and the sweet, cloying air already told the whole story. The noble consort Chun was already here, eagerly taking credit as soon as the Empress Dowager entered, with a face full of disappointment. She couldn't hide the glee in her eyes. Auntie, this little wretch is too. It's a pity the scoundrel escaped. The noble consort Chun is mistaken. The scoundrel won't get away. I smiled faintly, raising an eyebrow, and lightly clapped my hands. Moments later, a few eunuchs brought a man forward. The smile on the pure consort's lips froze upon revealing her face, turning into an incredulous terror moments later. Ruer, why is it you? Oh dear, what is to be done now? The imperial decree has been issued. Does this count as the crown prince's misconduct in the palace? I interjected at the right moment, not looking at the pure consort but at the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager's clouded eyes shot daggers, but after years of navigating the palace, she quickly regained her composure. What do you want? She got straight to the point. Today, everything is tightly controlled, and no one knows except us. I chuckled and spread my hands. There are a few positions from the previous dynasty that I find quite appealing. I wonder if your family would be willing to step aside. After a great victory, the emperor waited for me in the palace. As soon as I entered, he naturally handed me a cup of tea. I drank it all in one go and sighed. The Empress Dowager is indeed very generous. Mu Qingrui used to be able to escape punishment for coveting maidens by feigning injury, but now for such a serious offense as molesting his stepmother, he'll have to pay a heavy price. The Empress Dowager wants to use Jiang Lu to seduce the emperor, so I'll turn the tables and bring Mu Qingrui into the picture, of course. This also requires the emperor's cooperation. Every time he summons Jiang Lu, he treats her like a mere lampstand, never taking a second glance, and when she's at her most despondent, I introduce the already lustful Mu Qingrui. I have been in control of the palace for over half a year, enough to arrange a few romantic encounters between Jiang Lu and Mu Qingrui without alarming the Empress Dowager. As for the abandoned palace where the Mandarin ducks intertwined, it was a natural progression that could be arranged. As for the pure consort, fearing abandonment by her family, she believed I was jealous and thus orchestrated a scheme against Jiang Lu, willingly becoming a pawn in my game of dog-eat-dog. Mu Qingrui and Jiang Lu, like a turtle and a mung bean, make a perfectly matched pair. No matter how much love there was in the past, it should continue in this life. But after such an incident, I wonder what status Jiang Lu can still achieve. I was gloating over the situation, when suddenly the emperor moved. He grabbed my arm, pulled me to sit beside him, and picked up an eyebrow pencil to draw on my face. I thought he was going to retaliate for what I had done earlier and quickly reached out to resist. In that moment of looking up, I saw the faint tenderness creeping out from his resolute face, and my heart felt like a light feather had fallen into it, making my heartstrings quiver. My ears felt hot, and with his hand on my jaw, there was nowhere to hide this flutter in my heart. I couldn't help but tease. Have you ever helped anyone else with their eyebrows before? As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Even though he never favored anyone exclusively, he did have a queen, and they did share marital bliss. Thinking of this, I feel a bit more uneasy. He paused, pen in hand, and after a long while, he said solemnly, "No, only you." The string in my heart has snapped. The Empress Dowager's concession has regained the emperor more room to govern. Having navigated the court for years, he naturally has trusted confidants to balance the overall situation. However, the inner court has been ineffective, with Mu Qingrui almost becoming the sole candidate for the crown prince, leading many in the court to adopt a wait-and-see attitude. Now, with the atmosphere changed, I have stabilized the inner court, and with my father switching sides to support the emperor, more and more people are beginning to change their allegiance. To this day, the Jiang family voluntarily ceded their power, strengthening the loyalist faction even further. Even with the situation looking so promising, my father was still furious. The reason was simple. I kept the deal with the Empress Dowager entirely from him. By the time he noticed the shift in the court's direction, the initial transfer of power had already been completed. This was my decision. Given my father's concerns, if he had been given the chance, he would have undoubtedly become another Jiang family. How can I allow others to sleep soundly by my side, even if not for now, for the sake of my future children? I shouldn't. Just mentioning my children, I feel a bit anxious. In my previous life, I was drugged by Auntie Hua and Ming Wan, which left me childless. This lifetime, I removed the early, and even the chief physician confirmed my health is sound, yet the for children hasn't come. Days slipped by in this state of uncertainty, and 2 more years passed in the blink of an eye. The neglected consort Chun, long ignored, was now at the end of her strength. On her deathbed, she surprisingly requested to see me one last time. When I went to see her, her cheeks were sunken, no longer the picture of elegance and grace she once was. I recalled the past. In my previous life, she had also come to visit me when I was gravely ill, but back then, she was at the height of her power, flaunting her status as the Empress Dowager with arrogance. Fate plays cruel tricks. After all, she kept coughing, as if trying to cough out her lungs. After calming down, she looked up at me, pursed her lips seriously, and said, "Actually, I've never liked you. Even if my aunt intended for you to be Rui's official wife, I still dislike you. You noble-born ladies always put on this pretentious air of being the rightful wife, but who are you trying to impress?" It suddenly dawned on me what all her struggles in her previous life were about. The concubine envied the legitimate child, the imperial concubine coveted the empress, she trapped herself but blamed everything on me. Truly pitiful and laughable. She caught her breath again, beckoning me. "Do you want to know why you haven't conceived yet? Come closer, and I'll tell you." My heart sank. Could she be the one behind my infertility? Though it seemed impossible, my feet moved toward her on their own. She finally smiled, a strange light gleaming in her eyes. I thought, this is bad. Just as she sprang from the bed, pulling me toward the corner of the table, a dying person, yet unleashing such tremendous power. All the actions happened in an instant. Even my trusted maidservants didn't react in time. I was horrified, about to scream, when suddenly a muffled groan came from behind. My back collided with a warm chest, where a heart raced with fear and relief. The noble consort suddenly backed away with a gasp, collapsing to one side leaving behind a face of unrelenting despair. I was just regaining my composure when I turned to see the emperor's restrained expression. In an instant, the joy of surviving the ordeal turned into worry. I wanted to get up to check on him, but the room kept spinning uncontrollably. Finally, the world plunged into darkness. When I woke up, the emperor was beaming with joy. "Zitong, you're pregnant." I thought I must have misheard, but as I touched my belly under his confirming gaze, the child I had longed for so much was already there. Before I could gather my thoughts, the Empress Dowager came to see me again. She first pretended to show concern, then suddenly shifted the topic to the pure consort. Dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief to produce a circle of tears, "You shouldn't blame her. She was sick and confused. Now that she's gone like a snuffed-out lamp, and fortunately you're unharmed, let it be." At this point, I naturally couldn't hold a grudge against a dead person, but the pure consort's final desperate move left me suspicious. She knew about my pregnancy even before I did. Could it be that among the people I trust so much, there are still spies from the Empress Dowager or her? I voiced all these doubts to the emperor, and he remained silent for a long time before going off to make arrangements. A few days later, when he came to see me again, he seemed much older, and the way he touched my belly carried an infinite sadness. Once, my mother treated me quite well. She first actively returned power to me and then ordered the Jiang family to fully support me, but ever since Rui was born, her heart has been biased. She believes that a child with Jiang family blood can ensure the Jiang family's eternal prosperity. I didn't interrupt him, quietly acting as a listener. After all, it's the allure of fleeting wealth and power that blinds people. It's only because the two originally close individuals have come to this point. The eunuch I trusted most turned out to be her pawn, and she wanted to poison me slowly. The emperor lowered his head, covering his face with his hands, his voice filled with sorrow. "It's only since you've reformed the harem and replaced my physicians that she has temporarily stopped." Fearing her tracks would be exposed, I suddenly remembered my past life. Back then, the emperor's death seemed quite natural, as his health had never been strong. A sharp pain pierced my heart, stirring a different kind of emotion. I reached out and gently embraced him, offering my soft body as a temporary haven for the night. The emperor didn't touch those people, and neither did I. The immediate priority is not to stir up trouble. Ensuring a safe delivery of the child is what matters most. Ever since I became pregnant, the Empress Dowager has been restless again. She scolded me for monopolizing the emperor and introduced some new beauties. I accepted them all with a smile. The idea of one couple for a lifetime is too fake. I know my place. Everyone was delighted, except for the emperor, who seemed a bit displeased and kept finding faults for no reason. I have no time to think deeply. As my due date is approaching, the Empress gave birth. With the Empress Dowager overseeing the proceedings, I was helped onto the birthing bed, and through my blurred vision, I caught a glimpse of the Empress Dowager's figure, as if I heard her faint chuckle, extremely low and soft, like a mockery from hell. I understood her intentions. Among the midwives my father had painstakingly selected, there was one of hers. Childbirth for a woman is like walking through the gates of hell. One misstep could mean both mother and child lost, and the midwife by my side was the demon sent to send me to that very hell. Oh dear, I almost arrived too late, came the timely voice of the Grand Princess from outside the door. I struggled to open my eyes and finally breathed a long sigh of relief. The Empress Dowager has her strategies, but I have my countermeasures. Allying with the Grand Princess ensures my survival, and she personally sent me 2 midwives. The Empress Dowager's eyes widened in panic, and she began to cry and make a scene right in front of the emperor. Emperor, your empress clearly doesn't trust me. If word of this gets out, where will I even stand in this palace? The Grand Princess wouldn't indulge her. She pushed her aside and had the midwife brought in. What's there to make a fuss about, sister-in-law? If there's any issue with the midwife I brought, I'll take responsibility. Finally, I felt at ease, allowing the pain to overwhelm my consciousness. With the right people assisting, my delivery went smoothly. The baby's cries were strong and vigorous, and everyone bowed in the arrival of the imperial heir. I shook off my sticky hair and gazed tenderly at the tiny bundle. The regrets of my past life are made up for in this one. My heart is as soft as water. The emperor leaned over, and with his concerned expression, I suddenly felt a pang of, I'm not usually one to be overly sentimental, but the words that came out were so childish that even I was taken aback. I silently wiped the sweat from my brow. It must have been a natural reaction to the intense pain. The Empress Dowager left early under some pretext, her staggering figure betraying a hint of defeat. By the time the child's 3rd bath came, her gloom was almost impossible to hide. Mu Qingrui stood at a distance, his occasional glances filled with a helpless fury. Throughout history, the choice of crown prince has always been to favor the eldest son of the empress if she has one, or the eldest son of the concubines if not. Moreover, his maternal grandfather's influence has waned, his mother has fallen from grace, and his grandmother, though well-intentioned, is powerless. His path to becoming crown prince, barring any unforeseen circumstances, will abruptly come to an end. I glanced at him and moved on. For the rest of my life, as long as he doesn't actively seek his own demise, I am willing to coexist peacefully with him. The most pressing concern now is the emperor. The day of his previous life's death is drawing near. I dare not take any risks, even though I've removed the hidden threats. I faintly recall that in the past, the emperor suddenly experienced chest pain after dinner one day, followed by a coma, and within 5 days, he passed away. I used to only hope for the birth of a legitimate prince to secure my future as Empress Dowager, but after years of being together, I don't want him to die so soon. Thinking about this, I become increasingly anxious. The emperor didn't understand why, assuming I was overthinking postpartum, and after appointing my child as the crown prince, seeing that I still hadn't improved, decided to take me out of the palace to relax. Although I can't go far, as long as I'm not stuck in the imperial city, I feel a bit more at ease. But an accident still happened, and I was pushed into the water, struggling for my life. At the critical moment, a beam of light pierced through the darkness. The figure in the halo was agile, and with great effort, I finally saw the person's face. It was the emperor, approaching me like a deity, lifting me up without hesitation. As I broke the surface, I finally remembered the name I had called out in my dazed state. It was him. Unknowingly, my attachment had grown deep. In the end, we were saved, but the emperor caught a cold. The cold turned into a high fever that wouldn't break, eventually leading to unconsciousness. His fate seemed destined to connect with his previous life. I was unwilling, so I entrusted my child to the Grand Princess for temporary care and moved into the imperial palace. I wanted to take care of him personally. When planning and accidents went hand in hand, I had to seriously re-examine the inner court. Was the safety I once believed in truly without any flaws? I detained all the family members of the imperial physicians who attended the emperor, refused to let anyone else handle the preparation of the medicinal soup, and personally took care of the massages and bathing. After years of the is also surprisingly stable, which it was my father who subtly hinted at the benefits of my early ascent to the cold light in my eyes was no longer concealed the moment he opened his mouth. He was quite taken aback and didn't continue. Right now, all I want is for the emperor to live. I want to grow old with him by my side. I carefully fed him the medicinal soup, my expression tinged with melancholy and an undetectable hope of my own. At this time in your previous life, you were already gone, surrounded by endless glory. Yet it was just another unnoticed chapter, a lonely, widowed family member. How could they compare to now, with me taking such close and meticulous care of them? When you wake up, remember to treat me well. I don't expect you to take just one sip from the vast waters, but can I hope for a unique kind of affection? I was murmuring softly when suddenly the door was violently kicked open, and the Empress Dowager stormed in like a beast, shouting, "Arrest this fraud at once." What celestial phoenix maiden? It's all a lie. She's the one who harmed the emperor. The Empress Dowager sneered, her brows furrowed with anger and a hint of smug satisfaction, and with a flick of her hand, she pushed a eunuch forward. The eunuch trembled, not daring to look at me or the emperor more than necessary, and then confessed in detail how he had switched the imperial fortune sticks. However, he did not mention the emperor, only pinning the instigation charge on me. Moments later, Ming Wan, who had been recuperating in the family temple, burst out and exposed my lifelong skill in gambling, particularly my mastery of drawing lots. "Oh," I sneered, marveling at how the Empress Dowager had managed to gather these people together. The current situation clearly shows that the Empress Dowager is well prepared, yet, even as an empress with my son already named Crown Prince, I cannot acknowledge these. Pretending to be the destined phoenix is a grave offense. Once acknowledged, it would negate my identity and, equally, cast doubt on my child's status. I lowered my eyes, realizing why they had been so quiet lately. She knew she couldn't pull me down. Mu Qingrui's status as a concubine's son would forever prevent him from gaining the support of the court officials. The ancestral rule of establishing the eldest son has always been regarded as an absolute truth by the court officials. If that's the case, then it's not my fault. I looked up, bearing a fierce grin. Before the Empress Dowager could react, I swiftly raised my hand. Immediately, someone stepped forward, and with a swift strike, the eunuch collapsed, lifeless, while my half-sister was left without her tongue or tendons. Some things, if they pose a threat, are better off dealt with decisively. This is the secret guard the emperor left me, might as well use them. The Empress Dowager gasped for a long time, nearly losing her breath in fright. I glanced indifferently, knowing someone would clean up the scene. Mother, being older, is easily deceived by these scoundrels. That won't do, I concluded, my gaze sweeping past the door. The blood-soaked room filled everyone with fear, and even today, I basically control the harem. The Empress Dowager was nearly paralyzed, losing this battle in terms of momentum. Despite her deep resentment, without the means to challenge me, she could only leave in disgrace, but I knew she wouldn't let it go. Sure enough, the next day, when the Grand Princess came to talk to me, she expressed deep concern about the rumors circulating outside the palace. Although the courtiers' minds have not yet been swayed, it is detrimental in the long run, especially since the Crown Prince has come of age. I also know that preparations must be made in secret to prevent them from taking the path of rebellion. What we feared has come to pass. The Empress Dowager indeed has the audacity, backing Mu Qingrui and relying on the Jiang family, to raise the banner of cleansing the court of evil influences. I have long known that the Empress Dowager is deeply attached to her family. Perhaps in her previous life, she sought righteousness and found it, which is why she isn't as rebellious now. But in this life, she is willing to commit regicide to achieve the glory of her family. When it comes to life and death, I am not the compassionate bodhisattva either. A war initiated by me is not as justified as one started by the emperor. When one's heart is attached, one is always anxious about gains and losses. Mother, why are you siding with outsiders? Do you know what she did? When I was at Aunt's place, she sent people to beat me up. There were 4 of them, and they knocked out 2 of my teeth, last year. I lowered my head and met a pair of calm eyes. In an instant, tears poured down like rain. The emperor awoke, but he kept it secret, waiting quietly for the alliance between the Empress Dowager and the Jiang family, ready to catch them in a trap. The wrath of an emperor can be ruthless, even towards blood relatives. With everything settled, the Jiang family was completely destroyed. Mu Qingrui was demoted to commoner status, and the Empress Dowager was permanently confined to the palace. When the emperor left the Fingxi palace, his body was almost bent in half. No one knows what they said, and I kindly refrained from asking. He stood by my side, his hand resting on my shoulder. He looked down at me and suddenly said seriously, "Actually, that day when you were chatting with me, I think I heard some of it. I seem to recall you mentioning something about wanting a pet." I laughed it off. As an empress, how could I dare to think about such things? He chuckled softly, leaning down to pull me into his embrace, and whispered seductively, "Do you know, when you pushed me away while you were pregnant, I was actually very angry, though I could have had the entire harem, though I'm past the age of impulsive desires, all I could think of was being with you, having survived a near-death experience. I truly feel that plucking you, my delicate flower, would make my youth not wasted." My body trembled slightly. At this time in my previous life, I had just moved in from the Crown Prince's residence. Countless women were lurking behind me, waiting for their chance. The newly elevated Empress Dowager, the noble consort Chun, was causing all sorts of trouble. Emperor Mu Qingrui, who had just ascended the throne, had no idea what respect meant. In this life, I have a crown prince, the harem is peaceful, and the companion at my side whispers in my ear, promising me unparalleled favor. The clouds roll by, and I unfurl my brows. Filled with genuine joy, overwhelmed with happiness, I truly laugh out loud. Peaceful days, nothing more than this.